Amazing thing happened. It was after my sweetheart had passed 3 years ago. Someone knocked on my door. Her name was Sharon. She had come to see the gallery. My partner's name was Shara, and her gallery was open, but nobody had been coming until Sharon arrived. And I noticed that it was the same name, but went up to the gallery, opened it up for her, and while we were talking, I discovered she was a hospice worker. And I've always felt that the stories of the amazing things that have been happening since my partner left need to be told somehow. I mean, I think everybody who's got stories of connection with loved ones after they've passed need to share their stories, so it becomes something we can learn to expect and understand actually happens. It'll give us a better sense of what death is and that life doesn't actually end. Perhaps grief won't be as hard for people who are left behind. So I was telling Sharon about what I've been experiencing. And she said, oh yeah, she had had an amazing experience of her own. She told me this story. She said, I had two friends, Brian and Melissa, and they were very deeply in love. They were neighbors, and we used to talk over the fence when they were gardening and I was gardening, Sharon said. And at one point, Melissa told me that she had cancer and it was terminal. And the next thing, she was gone. And Sharon said, when Brian was in the garden, moving around, he had no interest in life. His lights had been turned out. He just couldn't care less. He was so distraught. He was in such pain and grief over the loss of his dearest wife. And Sharon didn't really know what to do about that. She just saw it and really felt a lot of compassion for Brian for all he was going through. And then she said, amazing thing happened. There was a dream. And Melissa came to me in a dream and she said, Sharon, you have to tell Brian a message. I've got a message for him. I've been coming to him, standing in front of him, but he doesn't see me. I need you to give him a message for me. Sharon said, I didn't know what to do with that. I mean, it was a dream. But it was after it came the next night and the night after that that I realized I really had to do something with this. So she said, I went to the fence when I saw Brian again and I called to him and he came over and she said, I felt very awkward, but I said to him, Brian, I've got a strange message for you, but it's come again and again and I have to tell you. And he said, well, what is it? And she said, well, Melissa's come to me in a dream and she wants to talk to you. She's got a message for you. And Brian just stood for a moment and then looked back at her and said, thank you. And that was all. And Sharon didn't know what to think. It was an odd moment. She's then heard that Brian had heard what she'd said and he'd gone to a hypnotherapist. And the hypnotherapist was able to make a connection between Melissa and Brian. And Brian was totally transformed. He'd had a conversation with Melissa, and there was no doubt that it was Melissa. It had her sense of humor. At one point, he was saying, well, something about her death. And she said, of course I'm dead. You're walking the dog, aren't you? She was the one who'd always walked the dog. And she was using that as kind of evidence that she wasn't around anymore. The whole thing was bizarre. But Brian was transformed. And he knew in that contact that he'd had